What's going on, guys? So if you didn't know, I'm in the middle of a collaboration with my movie reviewer buddies, the Schmoes Know. We are reviewing each previous Superman film before Man of Steel comes out in June. We already collaborated on the first Superman film that came out in 1978, and that review is currently on their channel. But now they've bounced back to my channel so we can tell you our thoughts on Superman 2. Before I give you guys my take though, please enjoy the Schmoes review of Superman 2.
Hey Chris, it is great to be on your channel. We are the Schmoes. I am Mark. That is Christian. We're very excited not only to be on Chris Stuckmann's channel, but to be talking about arguably the best movie so far in the Superman franchise, Superman Dos.
This looks a lot like your place. We're going to be talking about Superman 2, which for a very long time was probably my favorite superhero movie of all time.
Wow.
Yeah, I loved this movie. I couldn't get enough of this movie. And it's funny how this Superman 2 has such a history behind it.
It's such an epic movie, it needed two directors to do it. Kind of. Richard Donner was working on it, and then they kicked him off. They didn't like the way things were going, so they brought in some other guy named Dick Lester.
Yeah, Donner was like a visionary and could have, and obviously still has fit into the way today works. And these people were around that's why the cheesiness and the corniness came from the other side. When you see Donner's cut of Superman 2, it's a darker side. So we're just going to kind of talk about Superman 2 as a whole. We might cross over Donner's cut a little bit more. What I love about Superman 2 in general was the fact that the main bad guys are the ones in the very first scene of Superman 1.
It was really neat the way they set that up. We see Marlon Brando in the first one cast these three really evil-looking people into outer space, and then they land on Earth thanks to Superman threw a missile out into space. It blew up and shot them down to Earth. Lo and behold, they're going to go to the White House and make them kneel before Zod.
Yeah, I mean, there's the whole first scene in the beginning with the astronauts, and you see them land on the moon. And the reason why, again, yes, because Superman has to take this whole thing at the very beginning in Paris, and he takes the nuclear explosion, it blows up, and then they break out of the prison and all hell breaks loose. And I love when the three of them get there and they kind of discover, okay, this is on. It's the exact opposite of Superman.
Yeah, there was the big nuclear explosion in outer space. There was apparently a little explosion in Superman's pants because he has really had an affinity for Lois Lane, so much so that he decides to renounce his powers as Superman just to be with this broad. Hey, Soup, we need you.
There's a couple of things in this movie that you go, it makes you question because it's
power
like,
of women.
Because Superman, he gets his powers away and then he gets his ass kicked all over a diner.
Which is what. Let's talk about that
Yeah.
because I love that scene. Not only is it a cool song from Average White Band, it's also you see this guy, and I love seeing the look in Clark Kent's face where he's like, I know that this guy doesn't stand a chance against me when I'm me, but this is not who I am. Me getting the crap kicked out of me in this Idaho bar, it's not me.
No, and again, we've talked about this many times. The reason I enjoy this movie so much is because for a character like Superman, who's this bigger, larger than life, you have to have a great villain. And Lex Luthor, yeah, he's a great villain, and he's in this. Gene Hackman is in this again, but it's Zod. Zod owns this movie. Everyone remembers Zod, kneel before Zod.
Yeah, he's the menacing villain, and the other two aren't bad either. And then we have this huge showdown at the Fortress of Solitude.
Right, well, once he gets his powers back.
Yeah, everybody's involved, yeah. And
and don't forget Mr. Metropolis.
Yeah, Metropolis. That's one of the coolest scenes ever because, and it was filmed still. It's not a modern day movie, but it was one. It really still sucks you up, even though the special effects aren't quite up to par anymore. It's still neat to see all this stuff visually.
And it's a lot darker again. Like if you watch the Donner cut of Superman 2, they take different cuts from what he wanted to do and from what they used in the other cut, and you could see like the serious kind of tone that he was going for, and it's a bit more menacing with what Zod was doing and the pure domination, and wanted Kal-El just to kneel before him. Son of a jailer, kneel before Zod, and he gets so intense, and it's like, yeah!
It's all very epic stuff, and it is a great showdown at the end, and it's a credit to Christopher Reeve as Clark Kent / Superman that he was able to pull off this darker tone and be more vulnerable even as a superhero. And the movies were filmed like 2 years apart. It was the Donner cut, and then they had to shelve it for a while to get Lester back on there. So Gene Hackman refused to work for the other guy, for Lester.
Oh,
so that's
really?
why he's not in it as much unless you watch the Donner cut. So either one's really good.
It's very cool. I want to go back and revisit the Donner cut. I remember liking the Donner cut a little bit more, but which is stupid because I 5 out of 5 schmo both of these.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 5 out of 5 for Superman 2 as well.
Yeah, it's dated. Look, of course it's dated, but it is one of those movies. Just again, it was everything I remember as a superhero that I wanted to see that I didn't get in the first one. Well, who's going to be able to beat Superman? Well, you got 3 of them.
I got a way that you can watch those other 2. You can go revisit them right now. Stop yapping, and we'll turn it back over to Chris. How's that sound?
The hand movement, man.
I get it. Thanks, Chris. Now your take.
To me, it is honestly a miracle that Superman 2 is a good movie because of all the production problems that went on during this movie. Richard Donner, the original director of the first film, actually leaving the production, being replaced with another guy who had never even heard of Superman before in his life. Somehow, this movie actually turned out good. It is truly a miracle. This movie introduces a new villain for Superman to actually fight, General Zod. Now, he was set up in the beginning of the first film when him and his little cohorts were trapped in the Phantom Zone, floating around in space. When they escape and come to Earth and start to wreak havoc, this starts a war between General Zod and Superman. But it's not just between Superman. Zod wants the entire planet to kneel before him. He wants to be a ruler of Earth. However, at the same time, and unfortunately not at a very good time for Superman, he decides to give up his powers to be with Lois Lane because he really likes Lois Lane, apparently. This creates a lot of drama, a lot of tension, and some really fun action sequences in Superman 2, a movie that, in my opinion, isn't quite as good as the first one, but I still enjoy the film quite a bit. There's times when I watch this movie where you can kind of see different opinions clashing, which is obvious because the director changed halfway through and they reshot things and they changed things. And Richard Lester, the director who came in on this movie, who then later directed Superman 3, which we'll talk about soon over on the Schmoes channel, he came in and he had a very different idea of how to direct this movie. He wanted to make it look as much like a comic book as possible, and since comic book panels are just still static shots, he wanted to do a lot of that without too much panning, without too much movie shots, so to speak. That's an interesting idea, but I feel like maybe he could have directed it with some more flair. Honestly, comic book movies were very new at that time. Superman the movie is really the first one to do it really well. I think a lot of people were still a little confused about how they could actually make one of these movies. And I think it would have been a better film if Richard Donner had stayed on and was allowed to do his full ideas. Which, by the way, we do have a way of sort of seeing his idea in the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2, which in my opinion is much better than the theatrical cut. Christopher Reeve is still fantastic as Superman here, and one of the best parts of his character in this movie is that conflict between wanting to be human and still being Superman. Giving up his powers for Lois Lane or keeping them. Having to save Metropolis or care for Lois Lane as a human. There's some really great scenes here where he doesn't have his powers that are actually pretty heartbreaking, and Superman 2 did a really good job of portraying that character as he is in the comics, but also giving him a fun villain to fight rather than some wealthy landowner. The movie still has some of the same issues that the first one has nowadays, which really isn't entirely its fault, and that is that the special effects appear a little bit dated, some of the humor is a little dated, and that's just going to happen. But overall, I do feel that that first film is slightly better than this one because that origin story was told with so much care, and because it was great to have John Williams actually composing the music, because he didn't actually compose the music for Superman 2. Someone else imitated his themes. All in all, I'm going to give Superman 2 a B+. It's still a very good Superman movie, and I suggest you guys check it out if you were interested in that character. The Schmoes and my review of Superman 3 is going to be on their channel in a few days. Please go over there and check it out when it's up. Thanks as always for watching, guys, and if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.